My name is Samson, and this is my story. I now sit in a Philistine prison, chained and blind, surrounded by enemies who mock and scorn me. But it was not always like this. Let me tell you how it began back when the Israelites once again did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Because of their disobedience, Yahweh handed them over to the Philistines, who ruled over them with a heavy hand for 40 long years. The Philistines were a fierce and warlike people who lived in the southwest region of Israel, between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. They were known as the peoples of the sea, famous for their maritime traditions. During this time, they had expanded inland from the coast of Canaan, establishing a strong and ruthless civilization ruled by cruel tyrants in each of their fortified cities. In those days, in the town of Zorah, there lived a man named Manoah from the tribe of Dan. His wife was barren and had never been able to conceive. But one day, something extraordinary happened. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "Although you have not been able to bear children, soon you will conceive and give birth to a son. Therefore, be careful. You must not drink wine or any other fermented drink, and you must not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and his hair must never be cut, for he is to be dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. He will begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines." The angel of the Lord who appeared to my mother looked like a man, yet there was something in his presence, his face, his voice, his very being, that revealed he was no ordinary man. His countenance was like that of an angel of God. His message was clear and unmistakable. I was to be a Nazirite, and a Nazirite's vow is no small matter. It is a sacred commitment, a life wholly dedicated to God. Those who take this vow must never cut their hair, must refrain from wine or any product of the grapevine, and must avoid all contact with the dead. They are also forbidden from consuming anything considered impure according to the laws of Israel. But my calling was even more unique. I was to be a Nazirite from the womb. My consecration began before I was born. My mother, too, was required to observe the vow while carrying me, living in purity, for the sake of the child she would bear. In our culture, the news that the promised child would be a son brought great joy and honor. A son would carry on the family name and assume future responsibility, leadership, and blessing. My mother, overwhelmed by what she had witnessed, ran to tell my father that a man of God, whose appearance was like that of an angel, had appeared to her with the message that she would conceive and give birth to a son. Astonished, my father prayed earnestly to the Lord, asking that this heavenly messenger might return to give them further guidance about my life. "Lord," he prayed, "please let the man of God come again and tell us what we are to do with the boy who is to be born." God heard his cry, and once again the angel of the Lord appeared to my mother while she was alone in the field. She ran quickly to fetch my father. When he arrived, he asked the angel, "When your words are fulfilled, what rules should govern the boy's life and mission?" The angel responded, not with a new revelation, but with a firm reminder. "Your wife must do everything I told her. She must not eat grapes or raisins, drink wine or any fermented drink, or eat anything forbidden." The instructions were clear. My life was to be set apart for the Lord's purpose. Though my father had hoped for more, perhaps a glimpse of the future or a fuller understanding, the angel gave no further details. Instead, he simply called them to obedience, to trust what God had already revealed. Then something extraordinary happened. As they offered a sacrifice upon the altar, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the fire and rose toward heaven while my parents looked in awe. Trembling, my father said, "We are going to die, for we have seen God." But my mother, wise and full of faith, answered gently, "If the Lord had intended to kill us, he would not have accepted our offering, or shown us all these things, or told us what is to come." The prophecy was fulfilled, and I was born. My mother named me Samson, a name drawn from the Hebrew word meaning little son. As I grew, the Lord's favor rested upon me, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir within me. Even from childhood, it was evident that I was no ordinary child. I was marked for something greater. I possessed a strength that surpassed that of ordinary men, a power that could only be explained by divine purpose. And yet, like all men, I was not untouched by the pull of earthly desire. In truth, I was a man torn between the call of heaven and the temptations of this world. The sun blazed overhead as I walked the dry, dusty roads of Timnah, a Philistine city in Canaan, not far from our borders. That day, something happened that changed the course of my life. I saw her, a Philistine woman, and the moment I laid eyes on her, I knew I wanted her as my wife. It was instant, consuming. I returned home and told my father and mother plainly, "I saw a young Philistine woman in Timnah. I want to marry her. Get her for me." I remember the look on their faces, troubled, confused, and full of grief. My father asked, "Is there no woman among our people, among your relatives, or even among all of Israel, that you must go to the uncircumcised Philistines to find a wife?" Their question was sincere, and their concern was justified. In Israel, marriages were meant to preserve identity and faith. While it wasn't forbidden to marry someone from another Israelite tribe, to seek a wife among the Philistines' pagans and oppressors was something far more troubling. It was not just cultural, it was spiritual. But I was resolved. "Get her for me," I said. "She is pleasing in my eyes." That was all that mattered to me in that moment, what seemed right in my own eyes. My desire blinded me to deeper wisdom, to the warnings passed down through generations. Love at first sight is powerful, but also perilous. My parents feared what the scriptures had warned us about. Moses had spoken clearly, "Do not give your daughters to their sons, nor take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your hearts away from following the Lord, and his anger will burn against you." And yet, despite their fears, despite the danger they saw ahead, I insisted. I could not let her go. In time, my parents gave in, not because they agreed, but because they could not turn me from the path I had chosen. My family traveled with me to Timnah to arrange my marriage. The day arrived and we set out together. But during the journey, I separated from them for a time, walking alone near the vineyards of Timnah, a place where I, as a Nazirite, should never have been. Our vow strictly forbade any contact with grapes or their products. And it was there, in that forbidden place, that something terrifying happened. Out of nowhere, a young lion sprang toward me with violent force. In that instant, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon me with power, and with my bare hands I tore the lion apart, as effortlessly as one might tear a young goat. Such a thing was unheard of. In those days, Asiatic lions still roamed the regions of the Fertile Crescent. They were fierce beasts, symbols of wild chaos and danger. But for me, in that moment of divine strength, the lion was nothing more than a creature to be overcome. And yet, strangely, I told no one, not even my father or mother, about what had happened. We had other matters to attend to. The mission had to continue. When we reached Timnah, I spoke with the woman, and I was pleased with her. Everything seemed to be falling into place. With the meeting complete, we returned home, and I waited for the wedding day. When that time came, I journeyed back once more to Timnah. As I passed by the same path where I had slain the lion, I stopped to look, and what I saw astonished me. Inside the carcass of the lion, a swarm of bees had built a honeycomb and filled it with honey. I scooped some of the honey with my hands and ate it as I walked, tasting the sweetness of what felt like a reward for a secret victory. I even shared some with my parents and they ate, but I did not tell them where it came from. I kept silent, for I knew that by touching the dead body of the lion, I had broken my Nazirite vow. In secret, I had defiled myself. What began as a calling from birth was slowly becoming a life of compromise, choosing what pleased me in the moment while hiding the truth of my actions. The wedding was near, and it would mark more than just a union of two people. It would become the beginning of trials that would test not only my strength, but my identity and my destiny as Israel's deliverer. While my father stayed to finalize the arrangements, I prepared a feast in Timnah, as was the custom for men of status. It would last 7 days, an unbroken celebration filled with food, music, and wine. It was, in essence, a drinking party held in the house of the bride's family, ending with the formal consummation of the marriage. And yet, for me, this was no small matter. As a Nazirite, I was forbidden to drink wine or consume anything derived from grapes. But the tables were full, the wine flowed freely, and I was standing in the very heart of temptation. In those days, marriage became official when the families reached an agreement. The dowry and bride price were exchanged, and the union was publicly honored and celebrated. After that, the marriage was consummated, and the two were recognized as husband and wife in the eyes of all. When the bride's parents saw me, they appointed 30 young Philistine men from the city to accompany me during the celebration. I was the center of attention, a guest of honor surrounded by companions, an audience eager for entertainment. Seizing the moment, I offered them a challenge. "Let me tell you a riddle," I said. "If you solve it within these 7 days of celebration, I will give each of you a fine linen tunic and a set of festive clothes. But if you cannot solve it, then you must give me 30 tunics and 30 sets of festive clothes in return." The wager intrigued them, and they agreed without hesitation. "All right," they said, "let's hear your riddle." I recited it. "Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet." It was a riddle crafted from my own secret, the lion I had slain and the honey I had found in its carcass. No one else knew the source of the words, and I had no intention of telling. 3 days passed, and the 30 men could make no sense of it. Frustration grew, and by the 4th day, desperation set in. Fearing defeat and public embarrassment, they turned to manipulation. They approached my bride and threatened her. "Coax your husband into telling you the answer," they warned, "or we will burn your father's house with you in it. Did you invite us here just to rob us?" Terrified, my wife came to me in tears, pleading bitterly. "You don't love me," she cried. "You hate me. You gave a riddle to my people, but you won't even tell me the answer." I held my ground. "I haven't even told my own father or mother," I said. "Why should I tell you?" But she didn't relent. Each day she wept, wearing me down with her grief, pressing me relentlessly throughout the entire feast. Finally, on the 7th day, tired and tormented, I gave in and told her the secret. And she, in turn, went straight to the Philistines and told them. Before the sun set on the 7th day, the young men returned to me with smug smiles and answers on their tongues. "What is sweeter than honey?" they said. "What is stronger than a lion?" My heart sank. The riddle had been solved, not by wit or insight, but by betrayal. My new wife, in fear of her people, had chosen their side over mine. It was a bitter wound, not of the flesh, but of the heart. With anger barely contained, I turned to the men and said through clenched teeth, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." My words were sharp, my meaning clear. My wife had betrayed me, and whatever cleverness the Philistines claimed was stolen, not earned. She may have gotten what she wanted through tears and manipulation, but in doing so, she lost my trust and my respect. Though I was bound by honor to pay the price of the wager, I would not let the Philistines claim victory without cost. The Spirit of the Lord came upon me with power, and in a surge of divine strength and righteous anger, I went down to the Philistine city of Ashkelon. There, I struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of their garments, and brought the clothes back to Timnah, delivering them to the men who had answered my riddle. Justice was served, but my fury remained. The betrayal I had suffered, the humiliation before my enemies, it burned in my soul. I could not bring myself to remain in Timnah. Instead of beginning a life with the woman I had once longed for, I turned away from her and returned to my father's house. My marriage, once a source of passion and hope, had ended before it had even begun. This was the first chapter in my calling as a deliverer of Israel, but it was not the beginning anyone had expected. My strength had been revealed, yes, but it was wielded in anger, driven by personal revenge, not yet by clear divine mission. The Philistines had suffered a blow, but so had I. What began as love ended in betrayal and ignited a conflict that would only grow darker. Time passed. When my rage had cooled, I decided to return to Timnah. It was the season of the wheat harvest, and I carried with me a young goat, a customary gift of peace, a gesture of reconciliation. I will go to my wife's room, I said, determined to finally claim what was mine and consummate the marriage. But when I arrived, her father met me at the door and blocked my way. Nervously, he confessed, "I truly thought you hated her, so I gave her to your best man. But look, her younger sister is even more beautiful than she is. Take her instead." His words struck me like a blade. My wife had been given away to my companion, no less. My heart, already wounded, was now shattered. I had slain the lion, but lost my bride. This time, my anger boiled over, more intense than before. "This time," I said coldly, "I will not be guilty for what I am about to do to the Philistines." And I meant every word. Fueled by fury and vengeance, I went out and captured 300 foxes. With calculated precision, I tied them in pairs by their tails, attaching a lit torch between each pair. Then I released them into the grain fields of the Philistines. The fire spread quickly, wild and unrelenting, consuming everything standing grain, harvested sheaves, vineyards, and olive groves. What the lion could not destroy, I did. Their economy lay in ruin, their pride scorched, their fields ashes in the wind. When the Philistines discovered what had happened, their fury ignited. "Who did this?" The answer came quickly and clearly. "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite. He did it because his wife was taken and given to his companion." Blinded by rage, the Philistines responded with brutal cruelty. They went and captured my former wife and her father, then executed them by fire, burning them alive. When word of their deaths reached me, something within me snapped. I made a vow, cold and unwavering. "For this, I will not rest until I have taken my revenge on you." I was already walking a dangerous road, driven by betrayal and pain. But now vengeance consumed me. First, I had been deceived. Then my bride was handed to another, and now she and her father had been slaughtered by the very people I had tried to live among. It was no longer about marriage or honor, it had become a war of blood. I struck the Philistines with merciless fury, unleashing a devastating slaughter upon them. Afterward, I withdrew into hiding and took refuge in the cave of the rock of Etam. But the Philistines were not done with me. They gathered their forces and marched into Judah, spreading their army near the city of Lehi. Alarmed, the men of Judah confronted them. "Why are you attacking us?" The Philistines answered plainly, "We are here for Samson. We have come to take him, to avenge what he did to us." So 3,000 men of Judah came to find me in the cave. When they arrived, their words were not of support, but reproach. "Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? Why are you bringing this upon us?" they said, full of fear. I looked at them and answered with quiet resolve, "I only did to them what they did to me." But their fear of the oppressor outweighed their hope for freedom. "They have come to bind you and hand you over to the Philistines," they told me. I could have resisted, but I understood their desperation. They were slaves in their own land. "Swear to me that you will not kill me yourselves," I said. They agreed. "We will not kill you." We will only bind you and deliver you into their hands." So I let them tie me up with 2 new ropes, and they led me away from the rock. When we reached Lehi, the Philistines erupted with shouts of triumph. They believed their enemy had finally fallen into their hands. But in that very moment, the Spirit of the Lord came upon me with overwhelming power. The ropes that bound me became like charred threads, snapping and falling away as if they had never been. I scanned the ground and saw the jawbone of a recently dead donkey. I seized it and turned upon my enemies. With that jawbone in my hand, I struck down 1,000 Philistines. 1 man, 1 weapon, driven by the Spirit of God. After the battle, I cried out in triumph, "With a donkey's jawbone, I have made heaps upon heaps. With a donkey's jawbone, I have slain 1,000 men." My voice echoed over the battlefield, filled with the pride of a man who had just defied an army alone. When my boasting was done, I threw the jawbone aside, and the place was named Jawbone Hill, forever marking the site of that extraordinary victory. With that act, my rise was complete. I became a judge over Israel, a leader, a protector, a problem solver. The Hebrew word for judge doesn't simply mean one who makes legal decisions. It refers to someone called to deliver God's people, to lead them in times of crisis. And that was my mission, to save Israel, both from its enemies and from itself. For 20 years, I judged the nation. Though the Philistines still held power in the land, I had begun to walk in my destiny. But my journey was far from finished, and the greatest trials still lay ahead. Over the years, my name spread throughout the land. My feats were legendary. I became a symbol of hope to Israel and a symbol of terror to the Philistines. They hunted me relentlessly, seeking to end my life. Yet despite my calling, I was still a man, flesh and blood, prone to weakness. My greatest struggle was not with armies, but with desire. In time, that weakness would lead me into dangerous places. One day, I traveled to Gaza, one of the 5 principal cities of the Philistines. It was a reckless move, considering how many of their men had fallen by my hand. Gaza was a fortress, fortified with great walls and guarded by vigilant soldiers. For a man like me to walk into such a place was to invite death, but I went anyway. While there, I saw a prostitute and, giving into my carnal appetite, went in to be with her. It was yet another moment where I allowed impulse to overrule the sacred purpose I had been born for. Though my actions did not violate the exact terms of the Nazirite vow, no wine, no cutting of hair, they betrayed the spirit of what I was meant to be, a man set apart for God. News of my presence spread quickly. "Samson is here," they whispered, and soon the city was on high alert. The Philistines saw their chance. They surrounded the house where I stayed, posted guards at the city gate, and waited in silence through the night. "At dawn, we will strike," they said, sure that their enemy would finally fall. But they underestimated me. At midnight, I rose. Instead of escaping through some back alley or preparing for a fight, I chose a different way, one that would leave no doubt about the strength that dwelled within me. I walked straight to the gates of the city, the very gates the Philistines had locked to trap me in. There, under the cover of night, I seized the massive double doors, the post that held them, and the bar that secured them. And I ripped the entire gate from the ground. With the weight of Gaza's pride and strength on my shoulders, I carried the city gates uphill, all the way to the summit, facing Hebron miles away. It was not just an escape, it was a message. They thought they could confine me, that they could crush what God had anointed, but I reminded them, I was still Samson, judge of Israel, and God's strength was not yet finished with me. These gates I carried on my shoulders were no ordinary doors. They were the massive, fortified entrances to a key Philistine stronghold, designed not only to keep out invaders, but to withstand the charge of war chariots. Each gate was made of thick, solid wooden panels, reinforced with horizontal beams that slid into grooves in the frame to lock them securely. Heavy wooden posts supported them, with pivoting ends anchored into stone sockets. These gates were a symbol of power, of security, of dominion, and I tore them out of their foundation. The gates of Gaza likely weighed 400 to 500 kilograms, and yet I hoisted them onto my shoulders and carried them to the hill facing Hebron. It was not merely an act of escape, it was a public declaration. The strongest city of the Philistines had been left vulnerable by the very man they sought to trap. Before dawn could break, before their ambush could be sprung, I had already humiliated them, stripping them of the security they took pride in. The walls they trusted had failed. Word of this feat spread rapidly. Among the Israelites, it was seen as further evidence that God's hand was upon me. Among the Philistines, it was another unbearable humiliation. Their anger deepened, their hatred grew, and so did their determination to destroy me. But though my strength on the battlefield was unmatched, my weakness in spirit remained exposed. I had nearly thrown away my life in Gaza, not in war, but in pursuit of a fleeting pleasure. I risked my calling for the embrace of a prostitute. Again and again, I revealed the contradiction that defined me, the might of a warrior and the frailty of a man torn by passion. You would think after all this I might have learned, but no, pride blinded me, lust betrayed me, and so once again I wandered toward danger. It was in the valley of Sorek that I met her Delilah, a woman whose beauty could bend even the most unshakable will. She was charming, clever, and captivating, and I, still caught between the desire to be God's chosen and the craving for human pleasure, fell in love with her. But Delilah did not love me. The Philistine rulers saw what I could not. They watched closely, and when they saw my heart drawn toward her, they made their move. They came to her in secret and made their offer. Each of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver if you discover the secret of his strength and how he can be bound and subdued. It was a fortune more than 63 kilograms of silver. Delilah didn't hesitate. Her heart belonged not to me, but to wealth. With a cold and calculated smile, she accepted. And so began the final betrayal, crafted not on the battlefield, but in the bedroom. My enemies no longer needed swords or spears. They had found a weapon far more dangerous, a woman I trusted. With feigned sweetness and curiosity in her voice, Delilah asked me, "Please tell me what gives you your great strength and how you can be bound securely." I should have known better. I should have walked away. But instead, I played a dangerous game, toying with the truth, believing I was in control. "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not yet dried," I said casually, "I will become as weak as any other man." That night, as I slept, Delilah followed my instructions exactly. She tied me with 7 new bowstrings and hid men in the inner room of her house. Then she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you!" But I awoke and snapped the strings as if they were singed threads catching fire, worthless, weak, nothing. My secret remained safe. My pride remained intact. But Delilah was not pleased. "You're mocking me," she said bitterly. "You're lying to me. Now tell me what really would bind you." Still treating it as a game, I gave her another false answer. "If they tie me with new ropes that have never been used," I said, "then I will become as weak as any other man." She tried again. While I slept, she tied me with brand new ropes. Again, the ambushes were hidden. Again, she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines have come." And again, I snapped the ropes from my arms like thread. Her plan failed again. Delilah's frustration turned into anger, her voice sharper each time. "You're making fun of me, lying to me. Tell me how you can be bound." I gave her yet another false clue, drawing dangerously close to the truth. "If you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric of your loom and tighten it with the shuttle," I said, "I will become weak like any other man." She waited for me to fall asleep. Then she carefully wove my hair into her loom, locked it in place, and once more cried out, "Samson, the Philistines are here!" I woke with a start, tore free from the loom and broke away once again. But Delilah had reached her limit. She no longer asked gently. She accused. She wept. She wore me down day after day, pressing me relentlessly. "How can you say you love me when you won't share your heart with me?" she cried. "You've mocked me 3 times already. If your love is real, prove it. Tell me what gives you your strength." Her voice was like a constant drip on stone. Her tears, her bitterness, her persistence, each word carved deeper until I could bear it no longer. I was tired, worn, broken not by battle, but by a woman's manipulation. And in my exhaustion, I made the greatest mistake of my life. I told her everything. "My strength lies in my hair," I said. "It has never been cut, for I have been dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. If my hair is shaved, I will lose my strength and become as weak as any man." The secret was no longer mine. I handed it to the one who had been sent to destroy me. Delilah knew I had finally told the truth. With urgency and triumph in her voice, she summoned the Philistine rulers. "Come back once more. He has told me everything." And they came this time with silver in their hands, the price of betrayal. As I lay with my head resting in her lap, she gently lulled me to sleep. Then, in cold calculation, she called a man to shave off the 7 locks of my hair, my covenant, my strength, my connection to God. In that quiet moment, as each lock fell, so did the final remnants of the man I was. My strength left me. The spirit that had once surged within me withdrew. And then, as before, she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines are here!" I awoke thinking I would rise as I had done so many times before. I will shake myself free, I thought. But I did not know that the Lord had departed from me. I did not realize how far I had gone until it was too late. I had lived a life of compromise for so long, I believed it no longer mattered. But now, the weight of all those careless choices crushed me. The power I had taken for granted was gone. I was no longer a threat, just a man, a broken, vulnerable man. They seized me easily, and then they gouged out my eyes, blinding me in the flesh, as I had long been blinded in spirit. I had followed what my eyes desired, and now I would never see again. The irony was cruel, but fitting. I had chased what pleased me. I insisted on living by my own will. And in the end, I was left without freedom, without vision, and without strength. The wages of sin had been paid in full. They bound me in bronze chains and dragged me back to Gaza, the very city whose gates I had once torn from the ground. There, I was thrown into prison, forced to grind grain like a beast of burden. The once great judge of Israel, the man who had once stood alone against armies, was now blind, humiliated, and enslaved, reduced to the lowest of tasks. The Philistines rejoiced. To them, it was over. Their greatest enemy had been defeated, neutralized, and made into a spectacle. They believed their gods had triumphed, that their strength had finally prevailed over mine. But what they did not know was that my story was not yet finished. For though I was broken, though I had fallen, God was not done with me. My final act of deliverance was still to come, and it would cost me everything. The walls of the prison in Gaza were cold, damp, and unrelenting. Day after day, I pushed the heavy millstone in circles, my strength now used not for victory, but for labor fit for a beast. The creaking sound of stone against stone was my constant companion, interrupted only by the cruel laughter of my captors. "Where is your strength now, Samson?" they jeered, watching with twisted pleasure as I carried out the most humiliating of tasks. Darkness surrounded me, not just the physical darkness brought by the loss of my eyes, but a deeper shadow that settled in my soul. I had once lived by sight, chasing what pleased the eye. Now I lived by memory, by sound, by pain. In the silence of my prison, I had nothing left but time and the voice of my own conscience. I remembered the angel's words to my mother, the miracle of my birth, and the vow that had set me apart as a Nazirite. I remembered the strength that once surged through my limbs, the victories over the Philistines, the deliverance I had brought to Israel, but I also remembered the failures, my pride, my lust, my careless disregard for the vow I had been born to keep, and above all, the moment I gave away the secret of my strength to a woman whose heart belonged not to me, but to silver. My hands, once weapons of war, were now calloused from slavery. My back, once broad and proud, was bent with shame. My hair, once cut in betrayal, had begun to grow again, slowly and silently. A quiet sign, unnoticed by those around me, that perhaps not all was lost. And in that place of total humiliation, I experienced something I had never truly known before: humility. I had been stripped of everything: my sight, my strength, my freedom, my pride. But in that emptiness, I began to understand what it meant to be wholly dependent on God. The Philistines believed they had broken me. To them, I was no longer a warrior, but a spectacle, a trophy of their victory over the God of Israel. Our god Dagon has delivered our enemy into our hands, they boasted during their festivals. But they had only silenced the man. They had not silenced the calling. Something was stirring in the silence. In the shadows of my blindness, a new vision began to take shape, not with my eyes, but with my spirit. My prayers, once proud and rare, now came quietly, brokenly, from the depths of my soul. Lord God of Israel, remember me, I whispered into the darkness. If you have cast me aside forever, I accept it. It is just. But if there is still something left for me, if I can still serve you, if I can still deliver your people, give me a sign. Let me feel you again. And in that moment, I did not ask for glory. I did not ask for vengeance. I asked to be remembered not by men, but by the God I had failed, the God I now finally understood. One day, as I pushed the grinding stone in weary circles, my hand drifted absent-mindedly to my head, and I felt something unexpected. Hair. My hair was growing again. A roughness had returned to my scalp, and when I ran my fingers through my beard, it was thick and full once more. A flicker of hope broke through the darkness that had surrounded my soul. Yes, I whispered to myself, barely able to contain the emotion. It's coming back. No, my eyes would never return. The light of the world would remain hidden from me forever, but my hair, the physical sign of my vow to God, was returning, and with it, I felt something even deeper, a rekindling of the covenant I had once abandoned. My sin had reduced me to nothing, a broken man grinding grain in chains. But now I understood. My strength had not truly come from the hair itself. The hair was a symbol, a visible sign of an invisible covenant. My real strength had always come from the Lord. The Philistines noticed none of this. To them, I was still the defeated Samson, blind and mocked, a living trophy of their God's triumph. They paraded me as a symbol of their superiority, never realizing that the man they mocked was quietly rising again, this time not in pride, but in purpose. My thoughts grew clear. My resolve grew firm. I would never see the sun again, but I could still become an instrument of God's justice. The Philistines would pay not just for what they had done to me, but for what they had done to my people, to my God. That day was coming, and it was closer than anyone knew. Soon the Philistine rulers organized a grand festival to honor their god, Dagon. The air was filled with music, laughter, and chants of victory. Sacrifices were prepared, offerings were brought. Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands, they cried in triumph. Their voices rang through the temple like a great chorus of pride and blasphemy. Dagon, also known as Dagon, was one of the most ancient deities of Mesopotamia. He was revered as the god of grain and fertility. and in later traditions as the father of gods. His worship was centered in the coastal regions where the Philistines lived, and over time he came to be depicted in strange hybrid forms, part man, part fish. Some images showed him as a merman, a humanoid figure with the lower body of a fish. Others depicted him as a giant man, towering and imposing. In either case, he was the pride of the Philistines, the supposed source of their prosperity and power. They praised Dagon that day for my downfall, blind to the fact that their victory was built on sand. They believed their God had won. They did not know that the God of Israel was not finished with me. And neither was I. During my time, the worship of Dagon continued to flourish among the Philistines. His temples stood tall across Mesopotamia, including in Beth Dagon, Gaza, and Ashdod, cities steeped in idolatry. Dagon's son, Baal, was worshipped in various forms throughout the region. These temples, like the one now filled with shouting crowds, hosted grand festivals and offerings in honor of their so-called gods. And on this day, the people believed they were witnessing their greatest triumph. As I was dragged into the temple, shackled and blind, their cheers rose to heaven in mockery. "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands," they cried. "The one who slaughtered so many of us is now our prisoner." Their voices, dripping with pride, carried a deeper lie. "Our God is greater than the God of Israel. Look, we have conquered Samson." My disobedience had given them the illusion of victory. I had brought shame, not just upon myself, but upon the name of Yahweh, the one true God. Because of my fall, they dared to boast against him, and yet they did not know. They were standing on borrowed time, drunk with wine and the thrill of spectacle. They began chanting again, "Bring out Samson, let him entertain us." And so I was led out of the prison, through the noise, and into the temple of Dagon, reduced to a performer for the enemies of God. A child guided me, taking the place of a jailer, while the rulers and commoners laughed and mocked me, thousands of them, crowded not only inside the temple, but along its roof. The temple groaned beneath the weight of their arrogance. I counted in my mind 3,000, perhaps more. At that moment I leaned close to the boy. "Place my hands on the columns that support the temple," I whispered. "Let me lean on them." The boy, unaware, guided my hands to the central pillars, the very foundation of the building, and there I stood between them, my hands pressed to the cold stone, my eyes blind, my heart burning. Then I lifted my face toward the heavens. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. O God, please strengthen me just once more. Let me, with one final act, avenge the loss of my eyes and fulfill the purpose for which I was born." It was my last prayer, not for glory, not for vengeance alone, but for redemption. I had lived as a man torn between divine calling and human desire. I had squandered so much. But now, in this final moment, I offered everything I had, my strength, my life, my name, back to the God who had never truly left me. And I felt it, that holy fire, that unmistakable power, the same strength that once tore lions apart and shattered armies, surged through my body one last time, not because of my hair, but because I had returned to the Lord. With both hands braced against the pillars, I pushed, and the walls of the temple trembled. With every ounce of strength left in me, I pushed against the pillars and cried out, "Let me die with the Philistines." The columns began to tremble beneath my hands. The groaning of cracking stone echoed through the vast temple, turning celebration into confusion, and confusion into chaos. In a sudden, deafening crash, the central pillars gave way, and the massive roof, crowded with thousands, collapsed in an instant. Screams were swallowed in dust and rubble. The Philistine lords, their rulers, their warriors, and their people all perished beneath the ruins, and I with them. My final act as judge of Israel became my greatest victory. In death, I struck down more Philistines than in all the battles I fought during my life. The mighty temple of Dagon, once a symbol of pagan power and national pride, was reduced to ruins, a grave for idolaters. And through that act, God proclaimed to the world, Yahweh alone is God, not Dagon, not Baal, not any of the false gods of the land. When my family learned what had happened, they came to Gaza. From beneath the rubble, they recovered my body, broken but honored, and brought me back to the land of my fathers. They laid me to rest in the tomb of my father Manoah between Zorah and Eshtaol. I had judged Israel for 20 years. My life was a tapestry of strength and contradiction, of divine calling and human frailty, but in the end, I fulfilled the purpose for which I had been born. Word of what had happened spread quickly across Israel. The temple of Dagon had fallen. The Philistine leadership was decimated. Their festival of victory had become a day of disaster. Though the Philistines remained a threat in years to come, they never recovered the influence or unity they had during my time. My death had created a void that gave Israel breathing room, a chance to rise again. They buried me with honor, and in the years that followed, people remembered my name in many ways. Some called me a hero, others called me a tragedy. He died as he lived, they said, with strength and controversy. Parents recited my story to their children, not just for inspiration, but as a warning. Samson was the strongest man who ever lived, they would say. But even the strongest can fall if he turns from the ways of the Lord. My legacy was complicated. I was a man of miracles, yet a man of failures. I represented the heights that God's power can achieve and the depths that human weakness can fall. The priests taught from my life. Consecration is not about outward appearance, but inward obedience. I had kept my hair, yet broken the spirit of my vow. And when I lost the symbol, I lost the blessing. But in my brokenness, I also found my truest self, no longer leaning on strength, but on God alone. Generations later, even when kings ruled in Israel, poets and prophets still spoke of me. My name was recorded alongside the greats of faith, not because I lived a flawless life, but because in one crucial moment I trusted God completely. I had drawn strength from weakness. I had become powerful in battle, not by muscle, but by faith. This is my story. I am Samson, son of Manoah, from the tribe of Dan. A Nazirite from the womb, a judge of Israel, a man chosen by God, shaped by both victory and failure. And though my body lies in the dust, my name endures not because of my strength, but because of God's victory through me. Let all who hear my story remember this. There is no failure so great that God cannot redeem it. There is no fall so deep that he cannot raise us again. True strength is not in power, but in submission to his purpose. And true greatness is not in never falling, but in rising again in him. Samson's story is not only a tragic hero's story, but also a profound reminder of the true power that comes from obedience and faith in God. Despite his fall, Samson was still used by God to accomplish a great purpose. And that is what makes this story resonate today. If you feel touched by this story, if you believe that God's word is still alive and can change each of our lives, please help spread that message. Click like to support meaningful Bible content. And don't forget to subscribe to the Power Bible Stories channel so you don't miss the next stories, where each character in the Bible is not just a memory, but a living witness to God's power, mercy, and salvation. Thank you for watching. See you in the next stories.